Well, thank you very much and welcome everyone that's here. My topic today is enterprise architecture as an innovation accelerator. Quite a bit to cover here. I'm going to do my best to get to my case study, which is around the area of quantum computing, which I'm sort of studying now, which is really interesting. But we're going to focus around this area of strategy, demand, and innovate, sort of building out and calling and proposing a new abstract for a framework for enterprise architecture. So welcome. My talk is going to cover a couple of areas, but the evolution of EA that really does continue and goes beyond that, what we call enforcement of standards, portfolio strategists, internal consultancy. Some of these things I'll talk about, which will go along with our sort of the evolution of EA. But what we're saying and I'm presenting today around this area of really, EA being that catalyst, being the accelerator, and being an avenger, if you would, of innovation. I consider the role of EA as if you consider the role of EA as a chief architect or even a senior architect or business architect, the responsibilities of all the pillars in strategy and demand and innovation, I think really do fit towards the area of emerging tech and innovation. And of course, we always start with business. A little bit here about the enterprise point of view. So I just wanted to call out that the enterprise point of view is typically looking outwards. And I think we all realize that as we start with understanding the business needs, the business investments, current state, future state, but also the ambition of the business. And I think that's really where EAs can really spark that innovation and really accelerate. And I'll talk a little bit about that, about the yes quotient. So it's really about the power of yes. I know in the old days of EA, we were sort of the cops of all things being architecture, the cops of all things being technology, if you will, or enforcement arm, if you will, for IT. But we have sort of leapfrog in lots of ways, and we leaped over that kind of thinking into lots of different ways of using enterprise architects, whether they're in a portfolio role, whether they're in a solution architecture role, of course, like myself and many of you that are really a chief architect or a principal architect or really designing systems in a very complex environment. So I want to talk a little bit about the evolution of EA. I've used a couple of slides here and some information I've kind of married in my thinking and the work that I'm doing at Whirlpool around some thinking that came out of Gartner. And of course, many of us use Gartner, but it's certainly not the only place to get information. There's lots of places we get information. And I'll go over some of those areas when we talk about curiosity and looking at the science of complexity. So today, I think EA is driving and really managing IT complexity to enable business and agility and growth. And one of the ways we do that is through that through the planning, or if you would, the demand segment of EA. So when we're really examining as business architects, as the business architects really take a deep dive on where the business is going and what their ambitions are, drivers, and those kinds of things. Of course, the capabilities in those spaces and where we see capabilities that may or may not be where we need them to be as a business and where we can actually help. So in the 1990s, and that's kind of where I touch my toes, if you would, in that space. And then we talk a lot about standardization from enterprise architects to, we really focused on cost reduction, and those kind of things. And those aren't bad things, and we still have them in our toolkit, right? But in the 2000s, we started to look more at an ecosystem and looking at the business and IT alignment and really talking about transformation and innovation and agility. So we went from, making decisions for the business and for IT to really helping the business and IT to make decisions. And that really spurred this era of growth and really enabling where EA really started to enable resiliency and growth. But it was still very complex, and it still is. Um, so one of the examples I have, I know when I worked at the Department of Energy, we had over 10,000 applications across different organizations, across different business units, lots of complexity when you think about, efficiencies of energy, the labs, lots of data that we were managing. And so it is an area of deep complexity, especially when you're in those large, very federated organizations. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about the drivers for change for EA. So we just talked about I just shared my thinking around, going from making decisions to really helping to make decisions. But now this era of AI has really leapfrogged us into, and I guess it's not really leapfrogging because it's been gradual, right? But those external factors and internal factors and the talent and governance are really some of the causes, are really some of the drivers, if you will, of the reason why we really need to make this real about face on how EA really delivers on innovation. Um, if we think about, those internal factors of the business and looking inward, of where the business and business strategies and business conditions and how we are, really getting after, if you will, that pursuit of the consumer journey and experiences. And whether you're in financial, manufacturing, healthcare, I mean, you really are concerned with customer journeys and experiences in your using your products, using your services. And of course, that invites the area of data science and deep learning, where we can really learn more about those entanglements, if you will. And then talent and governance, I think, is really, one of the value adds that EA can bring. We really do have, most architects have a sense of that end-to-end thinking. And because we have that sense of end-to-end thinking, we have a natural feel of governance, but it's certainly by no means where we stop. But we're always thinking about, the ways of helping the business to do things with a more effective, more efficient manner, whether we're using some method or methodology or framework that we've designed, or we're borrowing one from the industry. I think the talent in those areas and services and the need because of this new era of AI has increased tremendously. So what are the effects? The science of complexity, as we talked about before, brings along with it that era of technical debt and, of course, business risk. Because if we're paying more and not having a great deal of understanding about what we own, if we don't have the necessary skill sets, those kinds of things really will drive business risk and really can affect not only our bottom lines, but keeping talent, right? So we talk about developing an avenger mindset, really going after this thinking around curiosity, innovation, experimentation, and really doing that in an exponential way, building out frameworks and innovation frameworks and working with our partners, whether they are cloud providers or whether they service providers that really understands our business and really can help us to upskill our talent, as well as develop these platforms that we know that we need in order to get after those our consumers and our consumer journeys and experiences. And last but not least, the quest to manage that change and to reduce what I'm calling the threat matrix. As EAs, we've always unfortunately had that in many ways had it experience in trying to grow and build the value of EA. And I'm calling it a threat matrix because if you don't manage your stakeholders, and this is coming from experience, manage those stakeholders in such a way, bringing them along the journey, assuring that the innovations and the work that we're doing as enterprise architects and as architects in general and engineers, that we're not stepping on their toes, if you will. And so sometimes the challenge is really strategizing around that and bringing them along so that they become the heroes of the day. In some cases, it's really important in order for your EA program to really advance. So I wanted to start to expose a little bit around some of this thinking that Gartner had around the era of AI. And so those are the only two things I bring, Gartner really into this space. But it's interesting because that traditional EA and the application of technology and things of that nature is something that we've done traditionally, solutions and technical. But as you know, in the I would say late 90s, early 2000s, we really started to make that turn towards the business outcome driven EA. And that's where I saw, where EA was more, into the, working directly with the portfolio managers or product owners, that kind of thing, product leaders. And I saw that work really happening. Today, and at least for the last 7 years, my role has been more of an internal management consultancy. And that's where you have that deep subject matter expertise in EA. And so you've hired people that are really smart in those different areas, really have the skills, but also have the curiosity to learn more and continue to grow their own quotient, if you will. And now, of course, there's also the era of, distributed EA. And I've done that as well. But I kind of think about this differently because this distributed EA, in my mind, was really more of a federated EA. I never really did the traditional EA. I would say the traditional EA was embedded in my distributed EA. So if you think about it that way, and of course, back then we called it federated EA. And I think people still call it federated EA. But those are some of the different ways in which EA has evolved. And now in this era of AI, that's kind of where we are. This was 2023, but I do think now there is certainly the ideal of EA leaning forward, leading on the conversations of innovation, exposing the power of yes. So I'll talk about that a little bit later in the slides, in the talk. And I wanted to just start and park a little bit here because I know in my experience, in the 1990s, we had this mantra where we talked about architect, invest, build. And you've probably heard different things or different ways to extract this framework. So in the federal or the federal enterprise architecture space, that was kind of the mantra. As we grew in the early 2000s, I think there was quite a bit of work being done at the federal space. It got a lot of promotion. Books started being written, lots of groups coming together around the space, and EA really started to take off in the 2000s. And we started to hear this thinking around plan, architect, and execute. Still, to me, still more project-based or project-driven. But now I think there is a mindset that we need to shift towards. And I'm recommending and I'm proposing today more of strategy, demand, and innovate. And this has been my experience for the last, I would say 5-7 years, that it's really all about that strategy. And so we want to put a focus on that, the business strategy, the IT strategy, the business ambition, but then how does EA or how does IT pull in that demand if you work for an IT? I know not all chief architects work for IT. Some work for CFOs, some work for others. COO at one time I worked for, so they can be in different flavors. But at the end of the day, we still are taking in demand. And so how well you do that and how you can build out that or grow that mindset towards what I call the power of yes, and really innovate. So strategy, demand, and innovate. So that's kind of the my proposal for today. And I wanted to also take that framework, or at least that abstraction of a framework, still could build it around whether you're using TOGAF or DODAF or UAF or 4+1, whatever your liking is for frameworks, or whatever ones you've enabled. Like me, we've built our own. We took the best of like 2 or 3 and sort of build them out. But now I can extract from that. I can look at this as strategy, demand, and innovation. And so that's where I'm really looking at how we enable those decisions, lean into the business architecture, exposing the North Stars and the business initiatives and ambitions. In the demand section, we're really ensuring reusability. So that's where your tools come into play. We elaborate with the portfolio, and of course, we create portfolio intelligence. This is where we, as enterprise architects, create those visualizations, those great, talking points to help the business to understand why, when, and where. What their investments should look like, whether they have a great business fit, a cost fit, or technical fit, or they don't have any of the above. So, then it's time to retire, right? So there's lots of reasons why you would want to have some kind of visualization, and of course tell our stories about how we help the business, and of course that shows value and brings value to your organization as an EA practice. But then what I'm looking at is that that cycle of end to end. So it's like strategy, demand, innovate, repeat, because it's a constant need to look out and help the business. So in that innovate space, we're looking at driving that experimentation and learning mindset, developing speed through developer experiences, assuring that you have standards in those places. So see, standards still are part of our core piece of EA. And aligning those standards around an enterprise foundation where people can actually design and develop and build things. But then if they need to, if there's other options for that, we have a way for them to pivot to a new option, but we're not breaking the ecosystem to do it. And we're not creating more chaos and complexity. So simplified architecture is one of the things that we talk about in my space, and I'm sure it's something that you talk about as well. And of course, as I said before, avoid that threat matrix through good stakeholder management, and focus on that yes quotient, acceleration and accelerate innovation. So that's the EA leading and really looking at that end-to-end processes in a 3 pillar framework that you can align or overlay in anything that you're doing. So I wanted to leave you with that. Harnessing the power of yes and embracing opportunities. And actually, I heard this today on the morning talk with Wendy and the young ladies on that panel with her this morning, was embracing opportunities. And it resonates with me so much because it is all about that curiosity. But as we talk about enterprise architecture, we were at one point considered more of a, as I said, as through this evolution, more of a enforcer of standards. And now we have to be an avenger of innovation. And so it's really turning, again, doing that about face in the areas of research and investigations. As an enterprise internal management consultancy for an organization, building out a series of capabilities that will allow you to innovate and experiment, building out an innovation lab. So when there's a business need or a business ambition, you can test and innovate there. So these are some of the areas that I'm looking at in research. This is one of the there is a book, and it's on a Springer book series. I thought it was really great, opening for advancing in intelligent systems and computing. And it really does provide lots of insights to the disciplines of engineering, natural sciences, computer and information sciences. Lots of things to learn for those curious minds I know that are out there just like me, that want to expose our teams to different ways of thinking about this, and also even careers, right? So preparing for that next career landing, being aware of systems, like quantum computing and things like that, and which I'm just exploring, which is really interesting for me because I was at Department of Energy for about 8 years off and on. I returned because they wanted me. They liked my madness so much, they kept bringing me back. And so I left the federal space and went into private industry. But as I said before, I don't, I look at both, Gartner, but as one of the researchers, because they have great graphics for one reason, but they also sometimes hit the mark on things that I'm thinking about, which is really interesting. I did a talk here about 6 or 8 months ago on composable computing, and it was really interesting, our composable architecture, and now there's books and things like that, and Gartner jumped on it. But sometimes there is also, you want to be in the bleeding edge space. And sometimes you don't see that there. So, looking at IEEE and McKinsey and MIT Technology Review, SearchGate, Science Direct, all these places really do have lots of information and I think research that's available to you. And most of it's free. So why not? So here are some of my team results, some of the things that we've done. Using that framework, really exposing that mindset of innovation as a key component to EA, is designing. We've designed an end-to-end architecture. Of course, that may seem simple. Some people think about that as SDLC, but it's truly not. It's really looking at that demand and understanding and making sure there are great ceremonies around stakeholder management and business activation. And then we also designed the innovation framework. So we did that last year. We built something called a test kitchen, working with our partners at AWS and Google. And it's been a lot of fun to really see that thrive and grow, and have had a number of things go through that framework and using it actively today. Implementation of our lab, again, that was part of that. And then enabling experimentation through the strategic partnerships and the ARB, the power of yes. I know lots of people think about the ARB. When they think about it, they get, a little queasy in their stomach, because sometimes the architecture review board is as some of the businesses could be a nightmare, right? Because they're always expecting architects to say no. And when I initially started in some of the places I've worked, that's how it's been. And I quickly try to turn that around for different reasons. I mean, you obviously have to do the due diligence. Our teams do that. But we do it in such a way that by the time you get to the ARB, it's not a checkbox. It's more of informational. We do the hard work prior to getting to the ARB, and then we sort of bring that together and serve it up as, here's what your new architecture will look like in the future. So that's kind of the way we're using it and focusing on that power of yes. So here's my case study, and then I'll stop and wait for any questions. But as I said, I've been, it was really interesting coming out of the Department of Energy space and being involved with supercomputer programs design with IBM, with others in the space at 2 or 3 of the labs that I've had the privilege, I have to say, of working with scientists and people that are really serious about this space. I work for the Department of Energy, but I was specifically assigned at the National Nuclear Security Administration, where you can imagine that's where lots of this quantum computing and lots of the labs actually started diving into this space. It wasn't that exciting to me at the time. Actually, I thought more about the cryptography side of that. But I did have an interest, and of course, I was put on a couple of projects and actually building some of the first warm computers, or computers that were cooled by warm water, actually, is what it was called. And it became, it was really a lot of excitement to see that space and that growth. But here in quantum computing, we have the opportunity to do some really great things. And, the way it's thought of in around this phenomenon and the superpositioning, it's really truly the things that we've been watching in movies and Star Trek and all those things, and maybe, other things that you can think about. I'm just trying to think about the ways that, was kind of introduced to us, kind of very, I say it was introduced to us in a childlike way. So you didn't really think about how that really worked. But there are actually folks that are really getting after, transportation or in this space, and it's very exciting and interesting. And I talk a little bit about some of the practical uses of it, just for your own information. They talk about these quantum bits, which are called qubits, as opposed to just bits, as opposed to ones and zeros. You're really looking at more complexity, and zeros and ones being a state. And you can have, in the quantum computer, you can actually have a 0, 1 in the same place. So it's almost like two spaces of time. Yes. So it's pretty exciting. And of course, the main, one of the main applications, of course, in my mind was always around this area of science for medical purposes, for diseases, because of the ability to compute faster. So, is it going to replace classical computing? Not yet. You're not going to have a quantum computer in your hand. However, the results of quantum computing will most definitely be in a space for coming at a computer or a project near you. This is really IBM's quantum development roadmap, and I just thought I'd show it just so you can see how quickly they've gone from 2019, and they're planning already in 2026 for their fastest computer that, scaling up to 10,000 or 1,000 qubits. And my understanding is like 100 qubits is kind of like more than like all the atoms in the, on the earth. So it's really an interesting space. Do I understand all the math behind it, all the science and physics? No way. But it's great to understand, because when you think about, as enterprise architects, the kind of problems that we have to solve in your space, you may already, and I have no doubt that many of you have already been talking about this in the space, especially if you're in healthcare or disease, control centers, or all kinds of things. Or maybe you work for the military, or maybe, you're in the space in financial where it's really going to leapfrog. But I just thought it's interesting to start to really start to embrace and look at some of the applications of it. So that's really what this is about. And this is a book, and the reason why I picked this book from 2007 was because, number one, I like to look back, and this wasn't even far enough, but I thought this author, the way he laid out the book was very informative. There's plenty of books that have been written since then, plenty. But many times, as you know, research is built on other research. So I like to go back to some of the giants, if you would, or some of the folks that you could really, understand what they were thinking, because typically they explained it a lot differently. And so I really wanted to understand how he was thinking about it before I start jumping in, and leaping into other materials. But these are some of the chapters that I'm most interested in, some of the areas I want to explore, hopefully some of the things that I'll learn about some of the uses. And so this is the business impact and the uses of quantum computing and its applications. I mean, if you wanted to just sum it up, you could say overall better predictions, right? But I would say at this point, the evidence is showing that it's not just better predictions, but that is the key. That's one of the keys. But there's things that we just haven't figured out yet, and some things that are just mind blowing almost. In science and medicine. But these are some of those just practical ones, and financial predictions, market movements, manufacturing. I mean, I was like, oh, manufacturing, really? Improving operations. Why would I use quantum computer for that? It seems like an overkill. I don't know. We could probably think about 10,000 things that would improve operations in manufacturing. But at the end of the day, having a computer that is doing that like 5,000 times past what you're thinking, makes sense. And then optimizations, just looking at loan predictions and freeing up capital and things of that nature. And I guess for me, one of the most interesting one was the emulation of systems. Scaling, complexity of drugs and molecules and materials. And to me, that's where the power will be, because you can do these not only faster, but better. So it's the way it was described in the book that I've been sort of glancing at, haven't really dived super deep into. It's really not just that it's doing it faster, but it's actually doing it. When we say fast, it's more a continuous or continuum. So you learn more, you continue to learn more in these calculations and in the processes of quantum computing. So it's an interesting space. I'm sure there's others. Of course, there's lots around the space of the sensors and blockchain, you name it. There's a lot. And so picking something and just drilling into it, to me, is worth the time. And of course, it gives me more to bring back to my customers and to my stakeholders about what we're doing and how we're doing and how we can do it better. So that's pretty much it. I hope that was a good understanding on EA, being accelerator and the power of yes, and really introducing a new framework, not, very, I would say, abstracted framework, if you would, just to kind of think about how you deliver on the demands of your stakeholders, but also doing it with innovation in mind. So that's where I am. Hopefully that helped someone out there. That's it.
Well, Pamela, that was a great talk.
Yeah,
nice job. So.
Thank you.
So I don't even know where to begin. Pick something and jump into it. You didn't pick a little thing either. You picked something large to jump into. So there's a lot there.
There is.
For those people who don't know, the Midwest of the United States is quite the quantum computing hub.
Wow.
And are you actually in Michigan, or are you?
I am. And you're absolutely right. There's lots of work being done out here. As a matter of fact, when I worked for Department of Energy, we spent some time working with teams out in Colorado, Iowa, South Dakota, places like that.
Yeah, they're doing a lot of work. And we have, here in the Chicagoland area, we have 2 national labs, Argonne and Fermi, both of which are engaged not only in quantum computing, but trying to figure out whether that or some other kind of computing is going to be the future.
Yes, yes.
So let me just ask, from a practical standpoint, have you taken any of this interest in quantum and brought it back to your company? And what's been the reaction?
Well, like I said, sometimes, I mean, as EAs, we want to be ahead, right? We need to be ahead of the curve. So we want to maybe have some answers before they get asked,
Okay.
before questions get asked, being able to explore and share our capabilities with, being a management sort of consultancy within an organization. You kind of want to have your hands across a lot of things. And so, no. But again, I think that in our careers, we should always be thinking outward. And that is, part of the job of a chief architect is really to be thinking outward.
It is. And you're certainly doing that. If anybody on the webinar has a question for Pamela, feel free to put it in the Q&A. Or if you'd like, and it's easier for you, you can just raise your hand and I can open up your microphone for you. So let us know that. Oh, there's a, okay, let me see if I can get Jim on. So Jim has raised his hand. Let's see if we can pull him up.
Okay.
Jim, I think you have a pop-up somewhere that you can enable just to talk to us.
Mm-hmm. The
Let me
only
try
thing I
Eva.
did
Go ahead.
I was just going to say the only thing and as I was, doing the research on this, I was specifically looking for women in this space. And I tell you, there's quite a bit. There's lots of women in this space, more than I had thought. I mean, there's women groups around quantum, girls in quantum. I mean, it's, it's a physics space mostly, but physics, math, chemistry. So there's a lot there, of which I'm not an expert in any of those things, but I just love it. Just curious, right?
Eva, if you unmute your microphone, you can ask a question.
Okay, can you hear me now?
We can.
Awesome. Well, first and foremost, thank you so much for creating this space of a plethora of knowledge. I'm a part of the WIA community, so I know when we had our previous session, you gave just another great presentation, Pamela. So first and foremost, thank you very much. My question for you is, I love that you mentioned how just the idea of the cryptography aspect really sparked your interest. And while I'm a cloud architect, in my personal life, I'm actually really excited about cryptography and just the power and the innovation that blockchain technology, is just disrupting. And I'm very curious. Have there been any cross intersections between cloud computing and blockchain technology that you've come across?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of things happening in that space. Exchanges, both AWS, Google, all the big, cloud providers. I'm sorry, there's a lot of noise in the background, but are in that space now. And I think even with in the financial space, obviously that's where there's been a lot of work happening. So absolutely, I can't call like a specific research right now, but I definitely know because I was looking at sort of that space blockchain about 10 years ago. And the reason why is because I was working on my own patent and in a space for biometrics and I wanted to use some type of framework for how those transactions in that ledger would work. But it didn't exist at that time. So, or it wasn't fully vetted. And so I had the opportunity of speaking with some of the leaders in the standard space. I would recommend you looking at IEEE There's a lot of work in this space. And then I think it actually, the blockchain industry has its own standards group, an organization, nonprofit, if you will. And then there's also another group called BAIN, and I think it's called Banking Industry Architecture Network or something like that. And I could certainly, if you reach out to me in on LinkedIn or in WIA, I can give you the link to that as well. And they're really heavy in that space too. So, and certainly cloud is just a platform to deliver it for sure.
Awesome. I love that. Definitely will be connecting with you. You actually just brought to mind some other things that I feel like might pique your interest as well. So I'm more than happy to share that with you as well.
Sure.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right. Jim, did you have a question for Pamela?
Uh-oh. Did we lose Jim?
Yet to authorize mic. Jim, you may have a pop-up somewhere that you need to, because we can't hear you, but we've enabled the software part of it. Okay. Let's see. Any questions come in the hard way? Wonderful. Some comments, some wonderful insights. Curious on your success in introducing experimentation into the IT organization. Has it changed the culture?
Well, it wasn't, well, it's changed my team. Let me start there. It wasn't easy because, of course, in manufacturing, there are specific organizations and business units that focus on innovation for, building a better, as a matter of fact, we just released the slim technology. But anyway, if you, are working closely with the business, say in my space in manufacturing, that work is being done someplace else. But what we've done, for example, is started working directly with the CIOs of our organization. We have multiple CIOs. Our organization structure has a CIO per region. And so what we've done is, as my team has been able to understand what their big rocks are, what their initiatives are, and find where we can help them to drive some innovation, specifically around, especially in the space of data science and machine learning. So we've done some of that work. I'm just being careful here not to give away any secrets. Nothing special, but if you can imagine all kinds of work that's being around forecasting and supply chain. So. Yep.
So I think I have my mic working now. That was my question that you just answered.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. And I have kind of a follow-up. And it
Sure.
I introduced experimentation a few years ago to the engineering part of our organization. And it did change the culture tremendously. But it was grown. It started small and grew as a seed. I'm just curious, another kind of side question. Have you worked with Sean Griffin at all with the Department of Energy when you were there?
That name sounds familiar, but it's been some time.
He's long since retired. He was, I think, the Secretary of Energy at some point or along those lines. I'm working with him on another organization, and he talks fondly of that era when he worked in the energy department. So I respect what you're doing there. I have another question, just if you don't mind. My degree's in physics, so I like everything you've been talking about with quantum, and I'm a huge blockchain fan.
I'm sure you can teach a class on this. Yeah.
I think I'm more like you. I'm a student at this point, but I want you to compare and contrast, maybe, if you will, a little bit. I mean, you really can't compare generative AI with quantum. But what I'm getting at, though, generative AI is definitely a step up. Unsupervised machine learning and AI is a significant step up from the traditional machine learning that we had, where we were using supervised learning. And it's opening what I'm going to say minds and doors, and scares the crap out of people, but not me, with regard to the inroads that are being made. And quantum will just be another leap beyond that. You could say quantum leap.
Exactly. I know.
the use of things like, I mean, a lot of the technologies you're talking about are sometimes stifled in enterprises, and
Yes.
and it's difficult to open the doors to them. You talked about blockchain, machine learning, AI, generative AI. How are
Mhm.
you, I'm going to say, creating, um, I'm going to say, an environment free of fear, uncertainty, and deception?
Well, I think as you described it, it's not, it's not fast, right? We are trying to. We started with building out that innovation framework where we could have ideals, and the other thing is when the business, our organization is set up by regions, as I described, and there's a CIO in each region, and I work for the global CIO. And so one of the things that we do through our ARB process, we also have a pre-ARB. And our pre-ARB is an opportunity for people when a business or a BRF is not exactly ready to come to the ARB, and we of course we can help them along the way, but it's when they're wanting to explore. So we use that pre-ARB as a way of exploring ideas and questions and thoughts. And hey, we've been doing this for 3 years and it really hasn't worked. Has anyone heard, that kind of thing? But we do ask them. We put a little bit of structure around it, like they have to come with a question or a description of the problem they're trying to solve. Right, simple things. But they also, in some cases, we make sure they have a conceptual architecture. So just don't come in and just, it's not have your time with a circle of friends. This is business. We're trying to solve big problems in some cases, and we want the engineers and architects that are attending these meetings to be given the time to really assess and think about real problems and not just something that someone
Right.
yeah, but
So let me
that's an
suggest this.
opportunity.
You talked about being a yes organization, and I really liked your write-up. I was really intrigued to hear you speak, and you over-delivered. It's just wonderful. What I would suggest too, sometimes we've changed the word yes to how in our
Mm,
organization. So we don't use the word no any longer. We're not allowed to use the word no. We
mm,
now use, we
I
don't
like
know how, we'll work with you to figure out how.
it. I
And
love it.
and it's
Yeah.
changed, if you will, the dynamic of architecture, because architectures aren't the no card anymore.
Right.
Architecture is they'll figure it out with us. Art. I
Yes.
love that change is occurring in the industry as well. And you're a good example of that too.
Yeah, thank you. I love that. I love the how, and that definitely will, obviously help that threat matrix that I talk about. So, yeah.
I was going to add, since we have a few budding scientists in the room today,
Yeah, there
for
you
those of
go.
you that really have a science interest, I did mention both Fermi and Argonne Labs. Argonne Labs does a
Mhm.
quarterly set of presentations that are very interesting on bleeding or leading edge technologies that they're working
Mhm.
on. A lot of it is around energy.
Mhm.
Some of it is around climate change. Some of it's around pure computing things that they're doing to
Mhm.
try and do
Mhm.
simulations and things like that. So if you
Mhm.
have that bent, you can just go to the website for Argonne Labs and sign up for their quarterly Zoom meetings, I think is what they're using. I'm not exactly
And
sure.
if you can
Wow.
get a tour, it's worth seeing the grounds. I did some undergraduate work at Argonne Labs, and it was mind
Mm,
blowing.
Yeah.
yeah.
My only way of knowing of how to get a tour is you need to get a bunch of students, like high school students together, and then kind of, say, I'll be the chaperone.
Yeah, my fondest memories are Oak Ridge and going to Oak Ridge Labs and Berkeley Labs. So those are
Okay.
some of the places I had the opportunity to visit. And then again, I worked on the warm system cooling, one of the first with the lab out in Colorado. So I've had quite a bit of, as I said, it was a privilege and honor to work with those guys. They are true, scientists and just really serious people. So, yeah, so it was a privilege.
All right. Again, if you have a question, you can feel free to put it in text, or you can just raise your hand. Let's see. There was a question here from Gurpreet, who is going to be one of our next speakers, says, I would even go to say what is
I like
that we are trying to achieve. Sorry, having difficulty reading here. So we've got the yes, the how, and the what.
What? I love it. Yeah, thank you.
All right. So anything else you'd like to leave us with before we go?
I just
Given
want to
what
say
you've heard
thank
from the attendees, or
I'm sorry?
given what you've heard from some of the attendees and things like that.
Yeah, sure. I think, there's, as architects, we're just naturally, in most cases, curious. So use that. That's your superpower. We talk about connecting dots. We talk about, the science of complexity, being able to figure things out. And many of us come from a system engineering. And even if we don't have any of that, even as a business person, especially as a woman, we typically have these skills of just, I don't want to say juggling, because that's not what it is. It's like thinking in 3 dimensions. We're just able to do that. And, so I just say use those superpowers and always be thinking about what's next. That's what I would leave you with.
Excellent.